This is National 5 exam practice. It will be helpful for you if you've got an assessment in January or February time. We've got 11 mixed questions here, 29 marks to be gained, and we'll work through this variety of questions. This has been a homework for my class. Right, so let's go ahead and do the first question here. It's a fraction question. Right, so multiplying fractions, got a mixed number. I'm going to change this one to a top-heavy fraction. Okay, so the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go for 6 times 2 is going to give me 12 plus the 1. That's going to give me 13 all over 6. Okay, I'm going to then multiply that by 2 over 5. And the options I've got here are just multiplying straight across the way to get my solution. So 13 times 2 is going to give me 26. I'm going to have 30 on the bottom. And what I can do is I can simplify that down. I can divide the top and bottom by 2. And what I'll get is 13 over 15. When I look at that, I can't simplify that anymore. So that will be my final answer there. Another option that I would have is I could have cancelled out here or simplified down at this point here. I could have divided that by 2 and got 1, divide that by 2 and get 3, and then if I just multiply it across the way, 13 times 1 is 13, 3 times 5 is 15, and that would give me my answer. Right, so marks for this one here, we're going to get 2 marks for this. We'll go for 1 mark for getting this part here, changing it to top heavy and knowing that we're going to multiply across the way, and the final mark here, so that's our second mark there for that one there. So out of 2 marks. Next question, we've got find the gradient of the line which has equation 5x plus 7y plus 35 equals 0. So what I'd like to do with this equation here is get it into the form y equals mx plus c. Okay, and when I get it there, that's me. I'm going to just grab that number that's in front of the x, the coefficient x that's going to be there. That's going to be my gradient. So I'm going to rearrange this equation first of all. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get y on the left-hand side. If I get y on the left-hand side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 5x away from this side. So I'll take 5x away from the other side over here. I'm going to get rid of that 35 that's sitting there by taking 35 away from that side, and I'll take 35 away from the right hand side as well. So I'm just balancing up that equation. So what that leaves me with is 7y is equal to, so remember I'm taking 5x away to eliminate that, taking 35 away to eliminate that 35, and that leaves me with minus 5x on that side and minus 35. Right, the only thing I've got left to do is to get rid of this 7, and what we're going to do there is I'm just going to divide both sides by 7. Okay, so divide all of this by 7 as well, and we'll get our answer coming out here. So eliminated the 7s, so that's going to be y is equal to, so that's going to be minus 5 upon 7 x. Okay, I'm dividing that by 7. I'm going to divide this by 7 as well. So that's going to leave me with a minus 5 at the end here. So I've been asked to find out the gradient. So to get the gradient from this, I'm just going to take this value that's here. So from there, I'm going to say that the gradient is equal to negative 5 all over 7. Okay. So 2 marks here, so 1 mark for rearranging the equation to this point here, and 1 mark for stating the gradient. So that's 2 marks that we're getting there. Right, so change the subject to the formula is the next one. Okay, so I've got v is equal to pi r squared h. So what I want to do is to change the subject to the formula to r. Okay, so let's go for that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the pi and get rid of the h from that side that's there. So what I'll do is I'm going to divide this sign by pi, and I'll divide it also by h. If I divide the right hand side, I'm going to have to divide the left hand side also. So when I do that, what I've got left with is v pi h on that side, and that's equal to, I've eliminated that, and I'm left with r squared. Okay, so I don't want r squared, I want r on its own. So I'll take the square root of both sides. So if I root both sides there, that should just give me my answer, because the root and the square, well, they'll cancel out. That should leave me with r is equal to square root of v, and that's going to be all over pi h, and that's going to be my answer. If I want to write it round a little bit better and make it look like r is equal to root v over pi h. So there's my final answer there. So I'm going to get 2 marks for this. I'm going to get 1 mark where I've got the r squared up here. So that was r squared is equal to v over pi h. And then finally, by taking the root and getting the final answer from there, getting this one here. So that's my other two marks that's coming out there, okay? So that's 6 marks done. Okay, let's move on to the next part. Right then, so we've got a bit of factorising to do here. Here we go. So we've got a bit of factorising, and then we're going to gather these two things together in part C. So let's go ahead and do this one. Right, so for this type of factorising, I'd be using a magic number method. You can check one of my other videos about that, but I'm just going to go ahead and do this as it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the two of these together to get my magic number. So that's going to be equal to, it's 6 times negative 6. So my magic number is going to work out to be negative 36, okay? So if that's negative 36, I'm going to look at the factors of 36. 1 and 36, I've got 2 and 18, I've got 3 and 12, 4 and 9, and we've got 6 and 6. So that should be all the factors written down there. So I know if that's a negative number, one of these numbers must be negative and one must be positive, because they multiply to get that number there. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to be looking at this part here, so I can see that plus 5x, and what I want is these numbers here to make the plus 5x. So just for the first part here, with 1 and 36, I can make 35 or 37. Can't use that. Can't use this one. That's either 16 or it's 20. This one here is going to be 9 or it's 15, so I'm taking away or adding. Okay. This is going to be my pairing here. I'm going to use this pair here, so I'm not going to be using these. So if I'm going to try and make, I know one's negative, one's positive. I'm trying to make a plus 5x, so it'll be a plus 9 and take away 4. Okay, subtract, because they'll make the 5x. So I'm going to replace this plus 5x with a minus 4x and a plus 9x. Okay, so that's me just replace that, the middle part. And what I've got on this side is 6x squared, and here I've got a minus 6. I'm then going to cut this down the middle here, and I'm going to take a common factor from the left-hand side, which should be 2x coming out there. Inside the bracket, I must have 3x minus 2. And I'll just check that to see if that multiplies out. 2x times 3x is going to be 6x squared. 2x times a negative 2 is going to be negative 4x. So yeah, got that. On the side here, what I'm looking to do is take out common factor of the right hand side of that line. So it's going to be a plus 3 coming out as a common factor. That'll leave me with 3x minus 2, and that'll multiply back to get that. Now what I'm looking for here when I do this method, that bracket and that bracket are exactly the same, which they are, so I've factorised it correctly. So from here what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather this up, gather from there and there, so that's going to be a 2x that goes there, plus 3 that's there, and then I'm going to grab one of these brackets down, and that's 3x minus 2, and that's that part complete. Right then, so I'm going to go on to part B. So part B is, I've got 4x cubed minus 9x. So first thing I'm going to do is look for a common factor, which is the first thing we should always do when we're factorising. So x is common between the two of these terms. So x coming out, I've got 4x squared and a minus 9, okay? So I'm not complete there, because that's a square number, square term. I've got a difference, negative sign in between, and that's a 9 that's there, a square number. So what I can do is I can do a difference of squares with this as well. So that would be putting that into 2 brackets. So that'll be 2x, 2x there. I've got 3 and 3 there. One's a minus and one's a plus. And that would be that completed there as well. Okay. And finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and pull things together. So I'm going to pull the top for part A and part B together into this equation here. And what I'll do is I'll just write this out with, this is the equation from the top there, and there it's factorised. So I've got 2x plus 3, and I've got 3x minus 2. On the bottom line, what I've got is x, and that's going to be 2x minus 3, and 2x plus 3. Right, so from there, I'd be looking at cancelling something down on this type of fraction. So what I've got here is I've got 2x plus 3, 2x plus 3, and they're multiplying there. They're all multiplying. I'm going to divide the top and bottom by 2x plus 3. And they just go to ones. So what I'm going to be finishing up with here is going to be 3x minus 2 on the top, and on the bottom I've got x and a bracket 2x minus 3. And that should be my final mark there. Okay, so looking for the marks that are going ahead here. So what we'll get is we'll get one of these brackets being correct. So if I go for the first mark, I'll go for this one. Okay, and then the second mark is getting the whole thing right, which would be that one there. So that's 2 marks. I'm getting 2 marks for part B. And what we'll get is I'll take the common factor as our first mark that's there. And I'll get the rest of it. This part here is going to be the second mark that I'm going to get there. And finally, just the final answer for that is just the 1 mark, so that'd be it there. So 5 marks for that factorising question. That's not too bad at all. Okay, moving on. Right, so let's go to this question up at the top here, and it's a multiplying out the brackets question. Right then, so it might not be too great to see there, so I've got 5 minus 2 bracket x minus 2 close bracket 5x plus 2. And I have to just multiply out the bracket and simplify. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and start that one off. Right, so the 5 I'm not going to use at the moment. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a kind of bracket around this part here. Okay, I'm going to put a bracket around the there. Okay, so and what I've got is I've got the first bracket and the second bracket, and hopefully you can see that a bit clearer. Right, what I'm going to then do is I'm going to multiply out the bracket that's in there just by FOIL. So x times 5x, that's going to give me 5x squared. If I go for x times the 2, it's going to be plus 2x. I'll then do the insides here, so that'll be negative 10x. And then that'll give me a negative 4 when I multiply that last part out that's there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is with this, with any FOIL type work that we've got, we're going to be gathering up the middle terms. So I'll go for that first of all. So it's going to be a minus 8x minus 4, and then I'm going to multiply out this whole bracket by a negative 2. So the reason why I put that bracket in there was to protect this while I was multiplying it out, and now I've just got to be careful and make sure that I get my signs correct. So that's going to be negative 10x squared. A negative times a negative is going to be a positive, so it'll be a positive 16x. And the negative 2 times the negative 4, well, that's going to give me a plus 8 that's there. And then what I'll do is I'll gather everything that I can up together. So I've got the 5 and the 8, that's only things. So I'm going to go for 13. I've got minus 10x squared and plus 16x, okay? And what I can do with that is I can write it in maybe a different way. Usually we have the x squared first, but it's a negative. That would be okay, you know, so if I wrote it like negative 10x squared plus 16x plus 13, that would be okay. Or the way I could write it would be 13 plus 16x minus 10x squared. Either one of these two would do the job. So what I'm looking for is 3 marks for this question here. Let's see, the first mark I'm going to get for this line that's here. So if I take that mark there for that line, what I'll get next is for multiplying out that bracket by the negative 2, which is there, so that'll be that line there. And then the last mark will be for either that one or that one there. So that's the 3 marks for that question. Let's get a trig graph next. So let's go ahead and do this one. Trig graph, so looking at this graph, I can see it's a sine graph. And I know that I'm looking for a number that's in front of the sine. That number there would tell me it's the amplitude. Okay, so that'd be the kind of the amplitude of the graph, and the b value is how much the graph has slid from left to right. Okay, so if I look at this graph here, it doesn't really look like a sine graph, apart from that it's upside down. And generally, if I had a sine graph that was upside down, it would start there and it would probably go to about here, I think. So it would probably go to there, and then it would start moving from there, wouldn't it? That's the way that would go, and it would be up along that way there. So on this point here would be 90 degrees that's there, usually. But what I can see is to get this graph back to where it should be, I'm going to have to move it along that way by 30 degrees. So it's a 30-degree movement that I'm going to have to move the graph along that way there. So that's going to be a plus 30 that's going to appear in there. If I look at the amplitude of the graph, well, I can see that the graph goes from there to there. I can see the graph is oscillating between this from the 0, because it goes down to -2 and up to 2. So that's going to be a value of 2 that's there, but because the graph starts in a negative direction, my amplitude is going to be a -2 amplitude. So the equation of that graph is going to be y is equal to -2 sine x plus 30 degrees. So from there, I can see that my value of A is -2, and the value of B is going to be equal to 30 degrees. Okay, so just simply here, 1 mark for that, 1 mark for that. Just writing that down, we get you your marks from there. Okay, that's question 7 complete. Question 8, let's go for that one. Right then, so what we've got is the area of a rectangle is 24 square centimetres, and it has a length of 5√2 centimetres, that would be, that's there. Okay, so calculate its breadth. So that's what I'm going to try and do. Calculate it. I'm going to leave it as a surd in its simplest form and with a rational denominator. Right, so let's start this one off. What we'll go for is we'll say that the length times the breadth equals the area. So I'll start my work over here. So the length times the breadth equals area, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rearrange this wee equation, this simple equation, by subtracting L from that side, and, oh no, I'm not going to subtract, I'm going to divide by L on that side there, and I'll divide by L on that side, and that should sort my equation out there. Okay, so that's going to be A over L if I leave it like that. I'm going to substitute my values in now. So the breadth is going to be equal to area, which was 24 on the top. On the bottom, I've got the length, which is 5√2. So to sort this out as a surd with a rational denominator, I'm going to multiply the top and bottom by √2. So what we'll get there is 24√2 on the numerator on the top, and I'll get 5√4 on the bottom. So I'll try and sort that one out, and the way I'll sort that out will be to get the 2 from the bottom there. So I've got 24√2, and what I've got is 5 times 2. Remember, the 5√4 is a 5 times √4 that you can see in there. So that's going to be 24√2 all over 10, and I can simplify that down by dividing top and bottom by 2. So that's going to give me 12√2 all over 5, and that'll be my answer there. Right then, so first thing that I'm going to get as a mark is going to be for this part here. Okay, so there's my first mark that I'm getting. Second mark I'm going to get for multiplying out by √2. And then finally, I'm going to get my last mark for getting the answer with a rational denominator. And I think what I would normally do, this is where it would be marked just straight to there. And remember your units, if we've got centimetres squared or square centimetres, that's going to be centimetres in length. Okay, in the marking scheme, we're not going to penalise the lack of the centimetres that are there. Okay, 3 marks for that one. Let's move on to the next part. So what we have here is an algebraic fraction. We have to write it as a single fraction in its simplest terms. Now, whenever you see something like this here, all it means is x cannot be equal to 2 and x cannot be equal to -1, just to make this question work for us, so in mathematical terms. So generally you won't see that in the textbook, but this will be the type of question you're going to do. So we can kind of ignore that just now, and we'll work through this part here. So I'm just going to use the kiss and smile method, where I'm going to say that it's 2 times x plus 1. So I'm just going to write that on the top line, 2 times x plus 1. And then it's going to be the 5 times the x minus 2, but it's a negative in between it, so it'll be -5, and that'll be x minus 2 that's there. On the bottom line, it's that times that. So it's the kind of kiss and smile. So I've just multiplied from there to there, from there to there, and then it's the wee smile at the bottom, like that one there. Okay, so that's going to be x minus 2 and x plus 1. I'm going to sort out the top line, and what I'll do with that is I'll multiply out. So 2x plus 2 minus 5x, and remember, -5 times a -2 will give us a plus 10 that's there. And that's all going to be over that there. And I'm not going to multiply out the bottom line. I'm going to leave that one as it is there, so I don't need to multiply that out. Right, so finally, to get my final mark, what I'm going to do is I'm going to gather things up on the top. So what I've got is I've got negative 3x, and I've got plus 12. That's all going to be all over these two brackets, and that's that done there. Okay, so first mark I'm going to get for the denominator being correct. Okay, so there's the first mark. So that'll be that one there. Next mark I'm going to get is for the numerator at that stage there. And then finally, the final mark would really be for all of this at the end, but especially that part there, okay? So it'll be for the full thing at the end, 3 marks. Right then, so we've got next one, question 10. We've got indices, and we're going to be dividing. Okay, so I would rather see that written as x to the power of 4, y to the power of 3, all over x to the power of 6, and y. Remember that y is to the power of 1. Okay, I'm just going to write that in there so you can see that that 1's sitting there. Okay, then I know that when I'm dividing indices, I'm going to subtract the powers that are there. So what I'm going to have here is, so I've got x to the power of 4, so it's like x to the power of 4 take away 6, and I've got y to the power of 3 take away 1. And if I simplify that out, what I've got is x to the power of negative 2 and y to the power of 2. Now I might think that's me finished, but with this question here, I've got to make sure that I write it with positive powers. There's a negative power on there. So the way I'm going to sort that out is I'm just going to take that to the bottom line. So on the top, I've got y squared. On the bottom, I've now got x to the power of 2. Not a negative, but that's to the power of 2. And that should be me completed that question. Right, let's see where marks come. We're getting 2 marks for this one. The marks are going to come along here when I get this line here. And then the final mark is really for getting this part here with the positive powers in it. So that's another 2 marks that's there. Okay, so nearly finished. Just got 2 more questions to go. Right then, so we've got this question here, right? So this is going to be it's a kind of straight line question, but it's part of a scatter graph. And what we're going to do there is we're going to try and determine the equation of the line of best fit for this one here. The way I'm going to go about that is I'm going to pick 2 points, okay? So the 2 points that I would personally pick on this one here would be this point here, which is a really good one for us to work on. So that's going to be a 0 and 15. So that's a great one to use. And the other one that I'm going to use, I would use this one that's down the bottom here. So where the line comes over the grid, and that point there would be 1400. And it's up 2 places, so that'd be 2. So that's the places that I'm going to move there. I'm going to call these axes, so this axis is the T, for that's temperature, and this is H, okay, for the height. And I'm going to try and remember to make sure that my final answer is going to have the T and the H in it, because I have to determine the equation of this line that's here. Right, so if I chose these points here, that would be different from what I've seen in the marking scheme, but these are the points that I would generally use. And what I'll go for is the gradient. So first thing is working out the gradient, and it's going to be, if we think about it as y2 minus y1 like we normally do, all over x2 minus x1. Make sure you get these round the correct way. And I'm going to start off with 2 take away 15. Okay, and then I've got 1400 take away 0. 1400 take away 0. And that should work out to be negative 13 over 1400. And then I can think about simplifying that, but it won't simplify down at this moment in time. So I'm going to leave that as that there. So that's my gradient. What I'll then do is I've got 2 options, but I can just see what my C value is there. This part here tells me that wherever the line crosses the y-axis, well, that's going to tell me where the C value is. So the y-intercept is 0, 15, so my C value is equal to 15. And I could go straight ahead and just put that into the equation and get my answer. The other option there would be if we didn't have that and we couldn't see where it crossed over the axes, then what I could do is I could simplify in, let's see, my gradient. So I'll substitute my gradient. Substitute the gradient equals negative 13 over 1400, okay? And I'm going to pick one of the points. So I'm going to pick that point that I chose down below, which was 1402, and I'm going to substitute that into, and I'm still going to call it the y equals mx plus c, but I'm going to change that right at the end to make sure I get the right letters in place. Right, so I'm going to take that as my x coordinate and that's my y coordinate. So that's going to be 2 is equal to my gradient minus 13 over 1400. And what we'll do is I'm going to times it by x, which is the 1400, plus c. So from here, I can cancel that and that out, okay, because they're multiplying and they're just dividing top and bottom by 1400. That leaves me with 2 is equal to negative 13 plus c. And then what I'll do is I'll add 13 to both sides. That'll give me 15 is equal to c. So that would be the way I would work that out if I didn't know where it crossed over the y-axis. But I do, so I wouldn't need to do that at all. Right, so here I go for my equation. So I'm going to substitute the gradient. So my gradient, minus 13 over 1400. And the c value, which equals, where are we, 15. And that's going to be into the y equals mx plus c. So here we go. So y is equal to, and my gradient was minus 13 over 1400, and that's going to be plus 15. Okay, so I've got an x that would be appearing in there, so the x. So that would be my equation if that was in the x and y, but it's not. So my final answer is going to be, instead of y, I'm going to replace that with a t. So t is equal to negative 13 over 1400. And instead of x, I'm going to put h, and that's going to be plus 15. And that's going to be my final answer. Okay, I think in the marking scheme, it's been that point there that's been chosen, this one up here, and that would give us a nice, neat numbers, but certainly that's the one that I would be choosing from here. So it varies depending on which points that you pick. Right, so marks for this question here. Let's go for it. Let's see where the marks are coming. Right, first one we're going to get for the gradient. So this will be this gradient here, or I think if you choose that point there, it's negative 1 over 100. Okay, for that one there would be your gradient. The c value is going to be this value here. If I can take it there, or I can just take it there, that would be perfect. And finally, I'm going to get a mark for writing out this equation that's here in terms of temperature and h as the height. Okay, so that's my 3 marks for that one. So it's just 3 marks, it's just a small 3 that's there. Right, so on to the last question, and then that'll be us finished. Okay, so what we've got here is a trig identities question. So what I'm going to do is with these, I'm always going to work on the, well, I'm going to work on the left hand side for this one. 2 marks involved here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to substitute in, I'm going to substitute in here. I'm going to say that I'm going to work on the left hand side. So left hand side. So I'm going to write out what that is first of all. So remember with this type of question, what I want to do is I want to make that left hand side equal to 1 in some way, and it's easy to see that that's going to work out. So one of the trig identities that we use is that sine squared x plus cos squared x equals 1. So that's the identity I'm going to use, but I'm going to rearrange that. So I'm just going to rearrange it, and that's going to say that, so for this part here, I'm going to know that sine squared x is equal to, so if I subtract cosine squared x from both sides, I've got 1 minus cosine squared x. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, in here, instead of this part here, what I'm doing with that is I'm replacing that with sine squared x, okay, because I can see that sine squared x is equal to 1 minus cos squared x from that trig identity that I've been taught. So what I've got left in the rest of the question is 1 minus sine squared x, okay. So from there, I've got sine squared x and I've got take away sine squared x. So just to make sure that you can see what I'm doing, I'm just going to put it right together, plus 1. So that and that's going to cancel out. That leaves me with 1. And now that I've shown that that equals the right-hand side, that's me completed that question there. There's a couple of different ways we can do this one. We could change that to sine squared x I could have changed that to cos squared x by doing the other rearrangement of that formula. And if I add them together, then I could just use that part and say that that is equal to 1. And that's a different way of doing it. So a couple of different ways of doing that question there. The marks for this one here, let's see where we're going to get them. So I think we're going to get a mark for this part here. So replacing one of these with either sine squared x or replacing that with cos squared x. Okay. And finally just getting it to be equal to 1 to show that it's equal to 1. So something like that there. So 2 marks for that. So for this question, for this paper here, what we've got is this is all going to be out of, so it's going to be out of a total of, I think that's 29 marks, I think I counted up for that. So just total up your answers, your marks for that. And make sure that what you're doing is you're working on the areas that you maybe didn't score so well at. Talk to your teacher about it, talk to me about it, and I'll help you move forward with this here. Okay, so that's a video completed, and hopefully that's has it been a wee bit of time, so that's about 30 minutes, so apologies for the length of it, but that'll give you the details and you can whiz through the video anyway. So good luck and all the best with your assessments that will happen over the January-February time.